Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our first Digital Humanities Undergraduate Fellows Showcase. My name is Tatiana Bryant, and I am the librarian for Digital Humanities, History, and African American Studies at UC Irvine. This new fellowship is sponsored by a generous donation to UC Irvine School of Humanities and co-directed by Professors Sienna Shemick and Yang Chen. The goal of this fellowship is to support undergraduates who want to conduct humanities research that integrates innovative digital tools and methods. Our 4 inaugural fellows created projects ranging from collecting oral histories to designing Twitter bots. I will let each fellow introduce themselves and talk about their work in more depth. And after our final presentation, we'll have time for an open Q&A. Feel free to leave questions in the chat for each fellow at any point. And we'll get started with Dee Richards first. Dee, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Let me get the slideshow ready. There we go. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, UCI staff, peers, and community members. My name is Dee Richards, and I'm presenting today on my cooperative project, The Mark of the Minotaur, a storytelling Twitter bot. My project partner is also in attendance today and will be available for questions during the meeting's Q&A section. I'm a junior in the upcoming academic year at UCI and a humanities honors scholar. I'm majoring in English and minoring in creative writing. My partner and I were born and raised in San Diego, and we are both transfer students into the UC system. My experience as a transfer has been integral for my pursuit of my goals as a writer, of seeing the quality education that is offered at both the community college level and the UC system. Since I am the first female in my family to receive any collegiate level of education, I obviously like to push the boundaries of what's possible. Stepping outside of expectation is what informed my curiosity in exploring the intersections of storytelling and technology, which I believe is the future of story development. My project partner is Will Brutok. In San Diego, Will worked for crowdsourcing giant GoFundMe before switching to a fully remote position and moving to Irvine. Will knew he wanted to be a programmer since he was 8 years old and was privileged to attend UCSD as a transfer student in computer science. In his career in both game and web development roles, he has participated in the creation and development of over 20 professional programs and applications, including The Sims 4. His main development focuses are on user interface optimization and internal tools. He's excited to stay on the cutting edge of new development strategies and created his first fully automated Twitter bot in March 2021, which is still operational. The Mark of the Minotaur is the first step into the never-before-achieved field of automated storytelling. While our current model uses a human-produced original text, we hope to develop data groups for a future of AI data population and integration. This project was conceived as a wild idea about 2 years ago, when my partner and I were discussing the similarities between writing novels and writing code base. This led us to wonder what was possible with AI technology in the realm of software development, which might be used to produce their own AI-written works. We visualized the complex nature of machine learning through trial and error as a sort of maze. We saw the process of telling a story in this format as a maze as well, that the computer might navigate and reach conclusions, but eventually build the maze as it solves it. The concept of the maze inspired us to revisit the most famous tale of the maze in recorded history, the Labyrinth of the Minotaur. If you are not familiar with this ancient Greek tale, let me explain some of the background. The myth of Theseus and the Minotaur was first displayed on pottery dating 575 BCE and developed over centuries to become a staple in popular media. Our work uses the myth of the Minotaur, and according to this tale, the Minotaur was born from a trick of the Greek gods Poseidon and Aphrodite inflicted upon Minos, king of Crete. Poseidon gifts the white bull to Crete as divine sacrifice to gain his favor. However, Minos decides to spare the bull, and as punishment, Poseidon compels Aphrodite to enchant Minos' wife Pasiphae with an unnatural lust for the animal. Once the lust is satisfied, Pacifier returns to her senses but is pregnant with a human bull hybrid, whom she names Asterion, but is more commonly known as the Minotaur or Minos' bull. Once the creature is born, it is quickly realized that it will only eat human flesh. Minos has a great labyrinth created to not only trap the monster, but also to keep it out of the public eye. The legend follows that after Athens betrays Minos, a pact is reached to send 14 noble male and female youths to Crete, unknowingly becoming the sacrificial victims of the Minotaur. The most famous of these sacrificial victims is the great hero Theseus, son of the king of Athens, who eventually destroys the beast. While stories differ about how often the tributes were made, it is undisputed that the sacrifice of 14 Athenian youths happened twice before Theseus even arrives at Crete. As such, there are at least 28, maybe more, Athenians destroyed by the Minotaur. The work produced in this project follows these 28 possible characters. The storyline currently running is about a youth named Mnestheus and cross-references many mythological and historical texts, as well as artworks, modern Grecian tradition, and even speculative fiction to construct a sensible original storyline that is entirely plausible. This original work is considered mythic fiction, which takes familiar mythological characters and settings and creates an entirely new work from those guideposts. This story follows Mnestheus, the son of a respected general, as he becomes the sacrificial victim of the Minotaur. The tale begins in Athens and follows his journey to Crete, where he is quickly pressed to enter the labyrinth. The total work can take anywhere from 30 to over 50 individual Twitter posts to complete a storyline, and the duration of the story depends on the bot selections between posts. Using 3 distinct motivation trees that have a lot of overlap, there are billions of unique story pathways available in our first model. These storylines conclude in one of 8 different ways, and there is weighted potential for divergence on nearly every post. Using Twine, I was able to construct a concurrent storylines that overlap or diverge as the story flow dictates. Will create a data parsing tool to extract the data, weighting, and connection information from Twine to use in its development environment. Together, we have created a tool that we call the Data Shepherd, which gently guides the story back to the storyline determined in the first branch to improve story flow. Here is an example of some of the Twine pathways I've created to illustrate the overlapping and diverging motivations in the comprehensive story. The data which I entered on Twine is then extracted by the parser and integrated into the bot. The Data Shepherd is a latent function which moves with the story to ensure regular story progression, much as a writer would build the story more naturally. For my demonstration of the project, I invite you to see it currently functioning on Twitter. Feel free to access Twitter via your web browser or app and search for @TheMinotaurMark. If you do not have a Twitter account, simply use your web browser to access twitter.com/TheMinotaurMark to view the project without signing in. There are a few posts already available to read, and another one will post automatically at 3 p.m. today. I will conclude my presentation by reading the first 3 posts of the project. You will notice that in these posts there is a lot of repetition of names or scenarios, and this is intentional for the form. Since each post shall be independent, it must function as a complete work on its own, while simultaneously connecting to the progressing story. And now, the introductory post to the Mark of the Minotaur. Mnestheus, son of the great general Iphicrates, was prepared for another battle. His father was furious when Athens withdrew from Persia, as commanded by Artaxerxes. Mnestheus' service was a test of his father's strength within him. The past 2 years did little to confirm it. Mnestheus' duty and service of Athens had been riddled with betrayal and deceit. Accused of cowardice by his colleague, he faced trial just as his service ended in his 20th year. He fought fearlessly, but could never fill his father's legacy. Now Athens turned against him. Athens was divided against him, and Mnestheus needed another battle, one he could win. Friends and neighbors sneered as he passed, awaiting the trial verdict. He had never been given to cowardice, and he was eager to prove it. However, with the war over, so was his success. This story will continue to run for at least the next 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the pathways the bot selects. At the conclusion of the storyline, we intend to either rerun the story to display the varying options, or utilize the unused pathways to develop a new work with a different character. Eventually, it is our hope to achieve full automation with AI so that the stories will continue without human input. If you have a Twitter account, please feel free to add at the Minotaur mark to follow the story as it unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. We'll have time for questions at the end. I welcome Jonathan to share his screen now.
Hello, good afternoon, UCI faculty and students. My name is Jonathan Ripto. I am a senior and I am a major in English and psychology. My project is dealing with double consciousness in the social media age. And so I use a lot of Twitter data and other information to kind of look at this emerging and evolving concept of double consciousness. This project was especially close to me as a member of the Black community and as a writer because I enjoy the stories that people tell, but I also like to understand what causes us to interact with stories and interact with opportunities and appearances as they arise. As we all know, the Black community has been rife with a lot of controversy, whether it be viral killings, whether it be the national allowance of the holiday of Juneteenth. And these different events have created generative conversation in the Black community. And I wanted to look at how social media played a role in propagating these new ideals or even condemning them. So I'm gonna mute my video so I can get a little bit more resources. So a little bit of background. I'm focusing on W.E.B. Du Bois's ideal of double consciousness, this ideal that double consciousness was an affliction that split the Black identity into two distinct halves. So Du Bois also argued that the Black existence is separated by a veil that obscures the white world and the Black world. So there were clear and concise boundaries that came into play when crossing between these liminal spaces. And it's the piercing of this veil that forms a doubled experience or this confused understanding of the world. And I also believe that the Black mind is a well of storytelling that is expressed in many different facets, especially now with the advent of social media. So in my project, I wanted to kind of look further into Du Bois's understanding of double consciousness, because I feel that it is one that ignores the current status of Black people. Black people inhabit different roles in society, whether they be politicians, entertainers, musicians, actresses, and this affects how they interact with the world around them. So these different statuses create different views, alternative views of the Black experience. And I would like to argue that the veil is not as fixed as it once was. The veil has new levels. Because a Black person is a politician, they have a different seat of power and a different way that they view the world and they view the white world that they come from. So the veil moves a lot. And Twitter has allowed a space for these different levels of the veil to interact with one another. And so to go about my project plan, I wanted to use Python as to Twitter scrape, and I wanted to use Facebook/Meta's AI service Roberta, which is good for looking at small chunks of information, but also understanding internet language such as sarcasm, shorthand text, and things of that nature. So some of the tools and functions that I used in this project were Twitter scraping itself. Twitter scraping is the process of aggregating a lot of data from certain time periods and using it to either look at trends, look at sentiment, look at how an event has impacted people. And basically with Twitter scraping, again, you choose a user or you choose a set of metrics like keywords or a hashtag, and then you grab them all and then it'll compile a list of items. for you, and then you can use whatever software that you use to calculate that. I also use Python as my coding background, my coding background, yeah. And so personally, I'm new to coding. I have a little bit of information with C#, but learning Python was something new for me. And so I was very glad to have that new learning curve and something to challenge me in order to look at my data in a different sense. And I also use Jupyter notebooks just as a place to store my code, just in case I need to change it, which I ended up changing a lot. I also use Selenium, which is basically a web automator. Twitter is a social media that supports infinite scrolling. And so in order to grab my data for me to scrape, I had to have a software that allowed me to infinitely scroll the platform. And that's what Selenium did with me. And in my case, I used Microsoft Edge to automate my browser. And then I used Roberta. As mentioned before, this is AI/Meta's, Facebook/Meta's AI software that looks at vocabulary and applies a sentiment score of 0 to 1. And the sentiment score is based on positive, negative, and neutral reactions, which we'll see more of later. This is just some of my initial code for the Twitter scraper. If you see at the bottom where it says query, that's where I'm allowed to put in certain usernames, certain hashtags, certain keywords, and other metrics. And the until and since function allows me to kind of choose which dates I want it to look at. I'm not going to really go into depth because it's pretty simple. And this code is my Roberta sentiment analysis. Basically what it does is allow me to import this digital library of words and sentence phrases that looks at things, like I said, like sarcasm or shorthand, and kind of parses understanding. Sentiment analysis is pretty easy for humans to do if we were to look at a certain tweet or a certain quote, and we can say, all right, well, maybe I understand what the author was trying to tell me. But when looking at things from a digital standpoint and having all of this work in front of you, it's easier to have an AI system be able to do that for you rather than going hand by hand and ascribing your own sentiment analysis. And Roberta's calculations are pretty positive most of the time. I think they're within 92% accuracy. So it's been invaluably helpful in me quickly parsing my data. So my method during this project was 3 steps. First was to choose the metric. So I chose 3 dates to look at. I chose the death of George Floyd, I chose the conviction of Derek Chauvin, and I chose the national announcement of Juneteenth as a holiday as 3 different dates to look at and to see how Black Twitter users reacted to this information, and if this information was affected by some sort of new double consciousness. I also chose my users. The users I chose namely were D-Ray, who is more of a political activist for the Black community, but I also chose another user, Jamila Lamo, who has more of an entertainment background. And I felt that these 2 different personalities helped complement and helped magnify this sort of fractured doubleness of double consciousness on social media. Then so I chose my keywords, such as Black Lives Matter, hashtag Juneteenth, and things like that. And I chose my limitations. My limitations were to choose 500 tweets and then quantify them from there. The second method was probably the hardest for me, which was compiling and proofreading my code. As I said before, I had little experience with Python, and halfway through my project, some of the code became depreciated, and I had to learn how to write that again, which was, it was a challenge, yeah, but it was actually very fun to kind of go back and understand where I went wrong or understand what I needed to learn. And then the final method is the use of Roberta, as said before, and this is that AI parsing data that allows me to ascribe sentiment scores to tweets. So I just want to go over some advantages and disadvantages of this type of research. So some of the strengths are we can quickly aggregate large amounts of data on a topic that has personal value to a community. So such as these large events, such as the death of George Floyd or the announcement of Juneteenth, researchers can grab a large amount of data at one time and then judge the sentiment of it and see how these events have impacted the communities that they're researching. Some of the weaknesses of this type of research are especially in Twitter's case, they're opinion-based short chunks of information that can be challenging to quantify without the right tools. And that's why I was so thankful to find Meta's Roberta software, because it allowed me the tools to look at these short opinion-based tweets and create these better understandings from them. And some of the opportunities that this type of research applies for us is to allow researchers to understand these implications of events, these trends, and even some type of predictive understanding to how certain events will impact a community. Some of the threats to this type of research are the ephemerality of social media and other online databases. It can be here one day, but then it can be gone the next. And so it's important to kind of look at these events as they occur to make sure that we can preserve this information. So here's an example of some of my data that I found. So it's categorized by the tweet, the user and the date, the subject, and the sentiment. So the first tweet comes from D-Ray during George Floyd's death. And he says, "Remember the violence that we caused, all this violence to the police. We did not start this." And so the sentiment from this is most overwhelmingly negative. We see it has 0.89 negative scale, and the neutral and positive are kind of, they kind of don't matter because they're so low. And then if we look at Jamila Lamo on Floyd's death, she approaches it from a very different, very different understanding, using a very different lexicon. So she says, "Imagine videos of dog killings going viral. They'd be in the streets begging for justice." But as we can see, both of these tweets took on this subject of Floyd's death, and they both have this negative sentiment. And it shows that just because a content creator uses a different verbiage, it doesn't mean that they're not trying to express the same point or the same condemnation. But we also see that certain events, if we look lower at our tweets 3 and 4, certain events can create vastly different understandings of the situation. D-Ray, after the conviction, says, "Remember, one verdict will not change our demands for transformational change. We deserve something better, more holistic, and that is actually healing." And we get more of a neutral or positive score from this. Whereas on the other hand, Jamila Lamo's more explosive and more flowery language of, "Now let's close this out like the last scene of New Jack City, and we can really have a party." This more entertainment-based approach has an overwhelmingly positive sentiment. So it's interesting to see how the same event can create these splintered understandings. So my initial findings from my research is that sentiment on Black Twitter around these events is generally negative and condemning, as one would assume. These events are harmful to the community, and so the Black community wants to condemn, and the Black community wants to be heard, and the Black community understands that this is negative and no longer needs to go on. Now, these pivotal events in the Black community generate differing opinions, as we've seen with Jamila Lamo and D-Ray during the conviction. They can create different opinions on something that we would assume has this stark understanding. And though the words may be different, the sentiment may hold many similarities. So it's very indicative of the platform that a content creator embodies, what words they'll use, but that doesn't mean they're not expressing it in a way that's similar to other content creators. And also, we found that roles in the community determine how Twitter voices engage with subjects. Whether you're a politician or an entertainer, chooses how you engage a certain subject and how positive or negative you want to be. So my future research, I do have plans for. I say at this point, this project is about at 65% completion. In the future, I would like to look at more in-depth analysis of engagement. Due to my limitations with Python and time constraints, I wasn't completely able to write code that allowed me to look at these expansive opportunities. I want to look at things like likes, comments, reposts, and also sentiment analysis of comments under these posts. And I believe that this will allow me a larger snapshot of the generative conversations that are made during these events. I would also like to look at the sentiment of comments based on location, whether understanding is different on the East Coast or on the West Coast or in the cities where these shocking events happen. Is the understanding of the situation a little bit different? Also, something that I will have to keep in mind looking at the analysis of comments is how to use bot rejection and bot detection during these comments, because Twitter is inundated by a bunch of bots. And so I would love to be able to notice these bots and kick them out and actually look at data from true users. And one final thing I would like to look at in my future research is this phenomenon exclusive to Twitter? I would like to look at other platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and see if this sort of fractured double consciousness is apparent on other forms of social media. And these are all my resources that I used, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. We will move to Rehana now.
All right, thank you everyone for being here today and hearing about what me and the other fellows have been up to this past summer. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to hear what we're passionate about. So I will be talking about my work from the past summer and the past 10 weeks. And I'll just get right into it. Right, just before I start, I just want to share a little bit about who I am. So my name is Rehana Morita. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a upcoming fourth year at UCI, double majoring in film and media studies and Asian American studies. A few different ways that I get involved on campus is I am the chief editor of two digital publications on campus, one called Her Campus, and one is a student blog through the UCI Office of Admissions. And I'm also an organizer through the Dream Center at UCI, and I organize the Undocu Art Collective, which is a creative space for undocumented student artists. And another fun fact, I am a lover of science fiction, reading tarot cards, and eating croissants. So in this past summer, I began production for a podcast called Undocu Organizing 101, which is a podcast about undocumented students at UCI. So the mission about the podcast is to amplify the experiences and the contributions and of undocumented students at UCI, whether it's in STEM or in the arts, business, or even just student organizing, and how the immigrant rights movement thrives on campus today. And the vision, the long-term vision of this podcast is I hope that it becomes a resource for other undocumented students, future students, whether they're first years or transfers, staff, faculty, or just anyone in the Orange County community who want to learn how they can better support undocumented students and what their current needs are, especially during the pandemic. So I want to share what interested me in this project. So in the past 3 years, I've in academia, I've faced a lot of challenges as an undocumented student myself. I'm also low income, I'm a financially independent person, and I'm also a first-gen undergraduate student. So at UCI, I've met amazing people who've really supported me, but I think the one beautiful experience I've got out of UCI is meeting other undocumented students who share like lived experiences that I went through, whether that's, you know, the challenges that we've gone through in our life, but also really the beautiful, resilient part of who we are. And one space that I really love and I'm so grateful that UCI has is the Dream Center. For those who don't know what the Dream Center is, it's a resource center, kind of like the Latinx Resource Center that is for undocumented students. There's so many resources that the Dream Center provides for students, including supporting DACA renewals, or I really love their Dream Project Fellowship, and they just really support students professionally and even just like on a personal level. And third thing that really inspired me to pursue this project that didn't happen on campus is I spent the past 5 months in Washington, D.C. in the UC DC program. And during the spring quarter, I got to intern at the Smithsonian American History Museum, where I was a consultant and also a research assistant for their Undocumented Organizing Collective initiative, which is a recent oral history project about undocumented organizers throughout the US. And through that experience, I got to learn about ethical storytelling and how it's important when we're centering restorative justice and highlighting the experiences of people who are the most oppressed in our society. It's really important when we're telling their stories, it's not extractive. And yeah, with that experience, and also in the summer, I really became interested in how I am the best storyteller about my undocumented experience. And I also want to help other undocumented people share their experience as well. And you might be wondering, why a podcast? Like, everyone has a podcast these days. And as a film student, I really wanted to experiment with other mediums that can tell stories that can be enjoyable for others, because some people like documentaries, some like writing or in other mediums. So I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to amplify audio storytelling by undocumented people. And second, I would say really just adapting to the pandemic and how collaborations have changed in a lot of different ways. And with podcasting, the really cool thing about it is that I can connect with people like in a different state or even across the country. And that state lines it doesn't prevent us from telling our experiences and stories. So it has been such a great outlet for connecting with other people. And the third most important thing is accessibility. So me as an undocumented student in higher education, that is an experience that a majority of undocumented immigrants in this country do not have the opportunity to do. So it is my goal to make this knowledge and resource to be accessible to as many people as possible. And everyone is also a different learner, and I know a lot of people are just not interested in reading about undocumented people's experiences. So I hope that people are interested in hearing directly from the people who are impacted by the system. So far in the fellowship and just working on this podcast, I learned 4 really crucial things about storytelling and how I could be a great storyteller overall. So one, the major thing is political literacy, and how understanding the current systems in the United States and how advocating for immigrant rights is a abolition-centered and driven global movement. So immigrant rights isn't just in the US, it's in every corner of the world. And it has become really important for me to understand, what the current systems look like, what kind of laws are in place locally and in the federal level and state level, and how I could be a better advocate for myself and others. And that also leads into research. And surprising enough, I was doing research in the UCI archives, and there's barely any resources available to learn about the history of undocumented student organizing or activism on campus. And I thought that was like kind of a cool challenge for me to take on. And that led me to work with Tatiana and Tuivodang, who's at UCLA right now, and connecting with local nonprofit organizations that work in immigrant rights movements, and even just connecting with activists and people with those lived experiences, because their stories are so valuable and has helped me so much in understanding what I wanted out of this project. And two really important things that I learned as in this project is, the technical side of things, experimenting with audio layout and editing and creating, marketing materials to reach out to people and get them excited to hear about the stories of undocumented people. And as for me to take on this collaborating and journalistic role, it has been really important and crucial for me to approach it with empathy and awareness about how it is, how collaborating with undocumented people is a very vulnerable act. And a lot of times it is a lot of re-traumatizing and just mentally exhausting. And it takes a lot from the collaborator. So it has been really like great training in a way to not be so extractive and keep in mind that this is the work that I want to do has to be like community centered and a tool for healing. So I wanted to share a little bit about my experience and of being an undocumented student, and I want to play just a small clip of the first episode, and yeah, I'll get right into it.
Young undocumented immigrants and students are frustrated with is how we are in the constant state of begging people to basically give us scraps, whether that's internship opportunities and making that available for those who don't have DACA or work authorization, or just asking student counselors or academic counselors or professors, teachers, faculty, to just understand more about how they can better support undocumented students. I've met a lot of professors who don't even know what that means. So a lot of students, because of the result of this, do not ask for the support that they need. And it's come to the point where I'm tired of asking for what the bare minimum should be.
Okay, that was a small clip of the first episode, and I will be highlighting more experiences of other undocumented students at UCI. So I come from, a storytelling background, but there will be so many other folks who are in, in STEM, who are really interested in other forms of, let's say, graphic design or even filmmaking. A lot of really cool entrepreneurs that that will be sharing their story as well. So I hope that that gets you excited to learn more about what the experiences are like for undocumented students and how you can be a better support in however you can in your capacity. All right. So even though, this fellowship is ending, which I'm really sad about, I'm viewing this project as a long-term passion project that I want to continue in the upcoming school year. So in the fall, I hope to just continue really building the podcast and its foundation, connecting with other undocumented students, especially the ones who are just starting or are transfer students. And I'm also doing a project with the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program on a collection of written work by undocumented youth and really highlighting their experiences through writing and poetry. And in the winter, I hope to expand the podcast to other UC campuses. I really love the work that the UCLA Labor Center and the UCLA Center is doing. And I've met a lot of really cool storytellers there as well. So I would love to visit them and other UC campuses and learn about how they're supporting their students and what their immigrant rights movement looks like there. And in the spring, annually, the UCI Dream Center hosts their Dream Project Fellowship Conference, where all undocumented students who are participating in the fellowship present their work and what they've been doing in the past year, whether it's research, a creative project, or just assisting with really building resources for students throughout campus, not just undocumented students. And I hope to, at the conference, do a live podcast recording with a student, and hopefully that could inspire other undocumented students to pursue storytelling, whether it's through podcasting or in other mediums. And in post-graduation, after the spring, hopefully I could continue working on this project as a graduate student. But if it's something that I just want to, kind of stop with the podcast, I plan to donate it to the UCI Special Collections Archive, which is the first of its kind, and hopefully can be a great resource for somebody who is doing research on undocumented students at UCI in the future. So thank you. That is the end of my presentation about what I've been working on in the summer fellowship. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you can connect me with other undocumented youth or anyone who's really supporting the immigrant rights movement, that would be such a great person that I would love to know. And I will be launching my first episode this week, so please stay tuned. All the updates of the podcast going forward is going to be through my Instagram of the podcast called Undocumented Organizing 101. So you could also, direct message me there. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention.
Thank you, Rehana. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to Ruth, our final presenter for today.
Just give me 1 second. I saw in the chat what you said, Tatiana, about a share audio. My name is Ruth. Ruth Belay, and today I'm going to be talking about my project, which is about Black student activism at UCI. And the subtitle of it is Filling in the Blanks. So I guess I'll explain it later. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Okay. So why am I doing this? So a big part of the idea for why I started to do this project was because of Dr. Tiffany Willoughby Herard. She's a mentor of mine and a past professor that I've had. And me and her were having a conversation. She invited me over to her home and we had dinner, and we were having a conversation about all the student activism and work that had gone into specifically the Center for Black Cultures Resources and Research. And then along with that, the work that went into getting the AFAM department to be a department, and all these students that were involved in things like that. And we were just kind of reminiscing about all of that in that time period. And she shot an idea towards me saying that that I should try and document that history, that I should take on as maybe a project for, as the project for my master's, to take a chance at it, take a chance at maybe gathering different students from the past, different alumni from the past who were a part of that time, And they would all have been people I personally know because we were all in that time period together. And I should try to gather that history. So when this opportunity for this fellowship came about, I thought about everything she said. And so I decided to just kind of make this as a jumping point for that. So yeah, so within everything that we learned in the workshops and stuff as this fellowship started, all of it was great for me to learn, of course. There's nothing that was not beneficial for me to know. But in regards to me looking for what I was looking for my specific project, there was nothing. There wasn't really much documenting the work that Black students did at UCI. And it was interesting because, like, you know, as someone who was there during that time, who was involved during that time, involved during with the demands team and the protests and everything that happened during that time, I was surprised, honestly. I thought somebody was, I don't know, writing it down or putting it down somewhere, but it wasn't anywhere. So in me doing this project, a lot of it was kind of like on the fly, to be honest. And I was just reaching out to different people who were there during that time in order for us to be able to do this type of a project. So the plan for this project basically was to document that missing history and being able to give credit where credit is due to those students who were a part of the development of the different organizations on campus that the university benefits from today, and that Black students benefit from today, and that all students benefit from, because as we know and as history tells us, the things that Black people do, everyone benefits from it in the end. Whether it's from imitating, whether it's from the courage they gain from seeing those below them be brave, everyone benefits from the work and the strength and the bravery and courage of Black people. And that's basically what was developed in this project. So the two people that I interviewed that were specifically a part of the demands team was Kayla Lacey, or Michaela Lacey, we call her Kayla for short, and pronouns are she, they, and, you know, she was a part of the UCI BSU and was a student at UCI from 2010 to 2014. And we also have Tariq Al-Mahadi, who went to UCI from 2014 to 2019. And Michaela was a BSU co-chair the time that they were here. And Tariq was a part of BQC, which was a Black Queer Collective, and a part of the demands team, as well as Kayla. And they were both very heavily involved in the demands for the implementation of institutional resources for Black students, as well as the Black Student Union demand to abolish the police. And these demands at the time were very, especially the abolish the police demand, were very radical demands, demands that people did not think of. And these demands kind of developed based on the suffering that Black students were going through on campus. And those things are listed in the demands as well. And I have the link for those demands as well, just to show them for reference. So just a couple of things that on the record for what Black students have gone through, and the things that they put in the demands for the implementation of institutional resources for Black students. UCI thinking it was okay to, as a way to celebrate in the Cross Cultural Center for the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium, they served fried chicken and waffles as a way to honor for the event. A fraternity on campus had words and signs saying, once you go Black, you never go back. They had that as an award. For who they were awarding that to, I don't know. What's their criteria of what Black is? I don't know. We can only imagine how offensive that could have been. I did not go to school during that time, but because I started in 2014, the same time as Tariq Al-Mahdi. But I can imagine how gross of an interpretation people have of Black people, especially when it's just based on stereotypical things that they think Black people are. And they also had paddles that were decorated and labeled as slave driver, little slave. There was a Greek fraternity that they did a suit and tie video, the song Suit and Tie by Justin Timberlake, featuring Jay-Z. And the person who was rapping Jay-Z's part appeared in blackface, which who knows why, right? There's no reason for you to have to do that in order to rap a part of a song, sing a part of a song. But for whatever reason, there was this part of these different non-Black students who felt the need to portray this type of being in order to imitate Black people on campus. So those are just a few of events that took place that initiated and ignited this demand for implementing institutional resources so that there could be a place for Black students to go when these type of things were happening, that was outside of the BSU room, that actually had funding, that had support from the university, that had things such as counselors and classes and just more resources than can fit in the Cross Culture Center in the small BSU room that was all we had at the time. So I'm going to play a clip from Kayla's interview.
Recording.
And I'm gonna start, I have the timestamp in my notes. I'm gonna start at 28:03 and I'm just gonna play for a couple minutes.
BSU
Can you all hear it?
in regards to that, but I for sure just remember us talking about it.
Could you hear it?
In and outside of
Okay.
our meetings.
Yeah.
But what I definitely can speak to is the suit and tie blackface video,
Right.
because that's where when Rhea and I were co-chairs at the time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I literally can see the moment where it all like popped off.
Yeah.
So I remember being in the BSU office. We were all just minding our Black ass business.
Absolutely.
And
As you always are. As
we always are. Right. Just minding our business.
Yes.
Someone brings up the video, and I remember us all talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, obviously we are all heated, so it's a whole room of us just hyping each other up validly.
Yeah.
I remember going to Facebook, and what I meant to do was go on my page, and I just started like just reeling off different statuses. I think saying stuff basically to the point of how this was messed up and being Black at UCI means. That's what I remember repeating.
Mm-hmm.
But I was actually posting it inside of the BSU Facebook group page.
Yeah.
So I am unknowingly hitting this whole group with being Black at UCI means again and again and again and again. And it felt like it blew up in that moment. A whole group of us got together. We led a protest then and there, I want to say. I remember us going into, yikes, I don't remember building names anymore. But there was a building nearby where they were having a meeting or doing something. And I remember us taking over the meeting,
Yeah.
circling around everybody, and everyone said what they needed to say. Can't remember exactly those details anymore. I remember old boy who was in the blackface was crying, and anyways, from there we continued to talk about what we wanted to do, because of course, in addition to the list that you just shared, there's 100 other things that we know have happened even before that were big across campus and small just between us and our friends that we knew had happened. So we put on multiple protests then, because I remember one from that time, at least two or I don't know, too many protests. They're all over the place. Who knows? But the one that OC Weekly loves, I don't know if they still do, but for a long time they would.
Okay, so that was the brief clip that I have from Kayla. And going on, I have a clip that I want to share from Tariq as well. Sorry. I need to be able to see the top of my, I apologize. Oh no. Sorry about that. So this next clip I'm gonna play is from Tariq Al-Mahadi. And Tariq is kind of talking about a little bit of both the abolish the police demands, as well as the implementing of institutions for Black students. And the abolish the police demand, and it's said in the demands as well. I can't click on it because of what's on top of my screen. But it came about, the thought for that demand pretty much, especially after the momentum that was from the first demand, which was the institutional demand. It came up about because there was a group of students who were a part, I believe, of ASUCI, who were saying that we just don't need to have, they were asking the question basically, why do we have an oppressive flag, the American flag basically, and just saying like, we should just make this a neutral space for the most part, or have I think it was either have all the flags or just make it neutral and just have no flags. And they ended up getting death threats. The police coerced them into saying sorry, didn't tell them they could leave the room that they were in when they were with them, telling them they don't do this, or that they shouldn't be saying this to the students and all this stuff. And specifically one student who was a part of that group who voted for that was a Black woman, and she received the most violence out of everybody. She received threats of rape. And trigger, I should have said trigger warning. She received very extreme threats and death threats. So the abolish the police demand came from that. So I'm just gonna play a clip from that as well. Okay, sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay, yeah. So let me pull that up. Timestamp 1:11. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna mute it for until it gets to the point that I want it to get to, because it won't let me press on the time that I want to be at. So Tariq is basically going to get into why such things were demanded, such as abolishing the police, things so extreme, or things that we think are extreme. But for them, or for the demands team at the time, this is what was felt that was needed at the time. And it was a big way for people to just say, like, we need the university to hear what we have to say. And sometimes in order for people to hear what you have to say, you have to go farther than you think, than you would ever think you need to go. So I'm going to turn up the audio. It is buffering. Oh, shoot. Okay. Black people couldn't even dream. Okay, wait, I'm sorry. It is buffering. Sorry, this was a moment where we were having technical difficulties. And I'm trying to get to the point where. Same for me. And I'm going to start continuing recording right now.
Demand that you think the university is going to agree with, then it's not a demand. At the
Right.
end of the day, it's a negotiation or I don't know, it's something else, but it's not a demand. We had to think outside the box of things that were, if we could get everything and anything that we wanted, what would we want?
Right.
So,
Right.
and that required us to have nerve and to be audacious and to take the risk to push out and abolish the police demand.
Right.
And that kind of a vision is very much in line with the tradition that Black people. We always ask for what we need and deserve and what must be in order
Right.
for us to be able to live and thrive.
And you can almost say it's like, just like what you're saying, Black protest tradition is asking what you could or could never have dreamed of. And there was a time, obviously, Black people couldn't even dream to vote, couldn't dream
to not be enslaved,
to not be enslaved, to not be able to walk freely without showing the identification of their slave owner,
we
to
had
not
to give
own a house.
We had to give ourselves permission to go ham, to
Right.
not give a fuck,
Right.
to speak truth to power.
Absolutely.
And people weren't on board. People even that were part of BSU, UCI BSU, people part of UCY BS, they weren't on board because a lot of them were tied to the experience of being Black. And the experience, it was reflected in us creating the previous demand of institutional changes.
Right.
But we knew that at the end of the day, let's say all of those demands got met, those institutional changes, the university and the world and the country would still find a way to harm us, to make us suffer, to create conditions that put us beyond the margins into the outside realm.
Right. And it's even just like what you said, saying, and even if the demands were not met or were met, they were not.
And they weren't.
Not met, and they weren't.
And they weren't.
Which even goes further, and it goes further to prove the point of what you're saying. And even when they force the Black students to negotiate, because it was forceful negotiation, because you just said, we don't want to put what the university will say yes to. We want a demand, not a negotiation.
Right.
So, yeah, so that was another clip from the interview I did with Tariq Al-Mahdi. And just to give context of what is meant when it's said that the demands were not fully met originally, this is a PowerPoint from back in 2017 that I have for what the original name for the Black Resource Center was supposed to be. It was supposed to be named after Marsha P. Johnson, and it was supposed to be called the Black Student Resource Outreach and Retention Center, not the Center for Black Cultures, Resources and Research. And that had a lot to do with just trying to combat elitism, trying to make a statement about we're not free until Black trans women are free. and just the different demands that were in there in regards to having Black counselors and to have the right amount of funding for Black students to be able to do everything that we would want to do on campus, so on and so forth. We're not all fully met. A good amount was met, which took a lot of fighting. But yeah, so, and I do have another interview with the current program coordinator at the Center for Black Cultures, Niobe Duke, but I just didn't include it in this PowerPoint because it's already pretty long. But I kind of just, through that interview, I listed the different demands that were in that specific petition for the demands for implementing institutional resources for Black students, and asked her, was this met, was this met, was this met, basically. And all of these interviews are going to be posted. I'm pretty sure I'm going to post it on Anchor, and which is a podcast site. And I'm also planning to donate it as oral history to UCI. So just going into what my future plans are for it, I hope to continue the project by connecting with other Black students who used to go to UCI, Black alums who were a part of the push for these organizations to show up at UCI, and who are a part of the demands writing, who are part of the protesting, who were even just Black students that watched on the sidelines, who are not necessarily within the thick of it, but were definitely affected by it, of course. So yes, that's the bulk of my project. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ruth. So I want to take a minute now while we transition to our Q&A to thank everyone from UCI Libraries who have supported our fellows this summer with mentorship and guidance. From Digital Scholarship Services, I want to thank Madeline Dickerson and Daniel Kane. From Instruction and Outreach, I want to thank Stacy Brinkman, Mosa Bowie, and Nicole Arnold. And from Special Collections and Archives, I want to thank Twibo Dang and Crystal Tribbett. So thank you everyone who joined us today. And of course, thank you to all of our fellows. Thank you for sharing your work. And thank you all for joining. Thank you for your time and attention.